Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another good series with Last in Line Leadership. And we are going to start a new one. The first October interview is happening today. And we have a great guest, Mr. Clay Smeltzer. He is what I would say, from what I've observed, a very self-aware, very passionate guy about building other men and helping people learn from his experiences. And that is like right in my sweet spot. That aligns with everything we do here on this channel. So I encourage you to stick around long term on this one. We're going to hit probably some hard topics, but we're also going to hit some stuff that's going to empower you and equip you for things. Clay, he's what he calls he's a man who owns himself. And I think that's really cool. I'm going to have him dive a little into that, to that statement. And he lives on purpose, which we've talked about. Things aren't by accident. And to have a purpose, we got to be on purpose. And I think he tees that up really well. You know, he's a dad, he's a husband, he's an educator, he's a coach. He's played collegiate baseball. I mean, the guy knows what it is to be a leader. He knows what it is to be a team. So welcome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, John. And I'm just excited to share my experiences. And I think that's one of the best things that the human race has to do is share stories. And if you think about all time, we teach our youth and next generation through stories and all those things. So I love sharing my story because what you've gone through, John, can help somebody else. What I've gone through can help somebody else. And anybody listening to this, what you've gone through can help somebody else too. So I'm excited, man.
Absolutely, man. And if you guys, I mean, he has a platform called Purpose Infused Coaching and a podcast. And I've listened to some of his stuff. And guys, I mean, you don't get any more real than this guy. And that's what people can appreciate. Talk about that statement you said about how you own yourself and kind of a little bit of your journey to this point, maybe before we dive into the meat of this.
Cool. Yeah. And really own yourself is owning it, like every single thing. And I didn't for a long time. I didn't own every single thing about me until I was about 36 years old. There's parts of me that I owned. There's things that I like that I own, but there was a lot of things, what I call shadow. And it's all those things that have either hurt you, emotionally scarred you, or opened wounds. It didn't scar you. It opened wounds because the healing process heals those wounds. But it was shame, it was anger, it was anxiety, it was fear, it was I think I said anger already, but anger's in there. Those different things were my shadow, and I didn't want to deal with those, especially anxiety and all the shame cycles that I was running with anxiety. So for me, I've always been a person of growth. I was an athlete through high school, and my goal was to make the major leagues. So I worked really hard. I grew, I got better. I was the first on the field. I was the last off the field. I made it a point to make sure that this was a team effort, not just a me effort. And then, went to college, ended up breaking my thumb in 3 places in college as a catcher. I caught the whole year, royally messed my thumb up, came back, couldn't play. And then after that, when they were like, dude, you can't do this anymore. And after that, that was a real identity loss, because I was Clay Smeltzer chasing in major leagues, but now who was I? I was Clay Smeltzer college student. It just wasn't the same. And it took me a bunch of stuff until I was 35. So that was at 20 years old till 35 years old. So 15 years later to really start asking myself the real questions, really start asking myself the hard questions. Now there was some growth throughout that time, those 15 years, especially going through 2 divorces, going through that, fighting financially, fighting for my kids, doing those different things. But, so there was growth along the way, but I really didn't know who I was or owned myself until I was 35, 36 years old, because that point I was sitting over on my couch over here. My wife and I, actually, she fell asleep, but we were watching a Game of Thrones episode, which I don't know how you fall asleep during one of those episodes, but we were watching that and the scene came on. And I started having a panic attack over the scene because I felt like the character in the show that was trapped. And it wasn't externally trapped. It was internally trapped. And I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about here too, is I was trapping myself in these negative cycles. And then those negative cycles trapped me in the shame cycle. And then that shame cycle made me feel less than a man, less than a husband, less than a father. And what I had to do is, well, I didn't want to talk. I mean, that's a man thing. Like,
right. We don't. Yeah.
I'll deal with it. I'll fix it. We'll push on through. But what we don't understand is that our shadow, the longer that we do that, the darker our shadow gets. And for me, I didn't want to tell my wife because I thought she would think I was less than. Yeah. But the problem with that is it wasn't her thoughts. It was my thoughts. I was mirroring what I thought about myself.
Yeah.
And once I said to her, hey, listen, because the whole shame cycle was, if I can't fix myself, how am I going to provide and protect for my family? If I can't provide and protect for myself.
Yeah.
And for me, that was very shameful as somebody who was taught, somebody who lived, like my dad showed that. And so for me, when I said that, she was like, yeah, I don't know what to do, but I'm here for you. And I support you, whatever that is. I'm like, man, I should have said this a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, that's man, it couldn't have, couldn't have planned it better to have you the first guy on here, because we're going to talk a lot about getting out of our way, of course. And it sounds like you and I can relate to that journey of kind of being our own worst enemy. And, we do have an enemy out there spiritually as well. And so when you factor that in, and then we're in our own way, man, it's almost impossible for us to walk this out the way it was intended. So I even added a little something to this, get out of your way, and call it the ABCs of it. And so we're going to talk about approach and barriers, and then the clutter involved. So clearing some of the debris as well. So we're going to go into the ABCs of this, and you kind of hit on it a little bit. The first one, we're going to talk about approach, and that's sort of an internal engine, right? That's sort of our attitude. And we've talked about that in our last month's series of attitude, intent, motivation. So attitude and effort, as a coach of my kids' competitive baseball teams for 10 years or so, we always harp on attitude and effort being the things we can control in an athletic environment, a competitive environment. That could be work even. So we have to, what I call, control the input and control the internal, deflect the external. So you talked a little bit about some of that, but talk about how your attitude folds into how you filter some of that stuff, and getting out of your way, and kind of allowing yourself to walk this out more securely.
Yeah. And I think, it might've been John Wooden, but your attitude determines your altitude.
Altitude, right.
I think it was John Wooden, if I quoted somebody wrong, but
I'm not sure on that one. I heard that though.
Yeah. But yeah, your attitude, I think, is everything, and if you have a junky attitude, you're going to get junky results. If you have a good attitude, you're going to get good results, because your attitude comes back to your mindset, and your mindset develops your thoughts. Your thoughts develop your actions develop a decision that you're going to make, and then taking that action. So and then that determines your results ultimately. So when we look at your attitude, especially you're talking about, sports and being an athlete and coaching, it's the same thing in life. Take that philosophy that we learned on the field. And if you go to a team, and actually I'll give you an example. Our head coach here at Kennerdale, the high school I teach at, we took over the team 5 years ago. And when we first really started getting around the guys, really like, all right, so what's your mentality? What's your thought process when you go to a game? Well, we're just here to have fun because we're going to lose anyways. We're like, what? Like, you're going to lose? Like, no. Like, that stuff ends here and now, period. Like, we never say that again. And it's that attitude that they were just going to go out and lose that made them lose all the time. So we changed that program around just really a lot on attitude, mentality, and culture, from being a losing team almost all the time to, in the 5 years that we've been there so far, we've gone to four district competitions. We've gone to states 3 times. It's like, so we've taken that and going, you know what? No, we're not losers anymore. We're winners. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to focus on in as men or as people, is that we can win, and we have that winning attitude instead of that either mediocre attitude or that losing attitude. Because your average attitude also gets you average results, which to
Sure.
me in school is like that anywhere from 70 to 80% or 85%.
Yeah.
No, and that's where it's like you don't have to be an A student in every area or the top in every area, but you do have to be the top in your area. But you got to know what your area is first.
Yeah.
And for me, when it comes back to those different things, is like I didn't know who I was, so I couldn't be the best version of who I was
That's
because
good.
I didn't do the work to figure out exactly who is Clay Smeltzer. I know what I like to do or love to do. I love to coach. I love to teach. I love athletics. But I didn't know who I was in order to be the best version of myself during those things.
Yeah. Give me an example or take me down a path here real briefly about maybe some adjustments you had to make as far as kind of deflecting some of the external and filtering some of that you felt like was kind of impeding your progress. Anything you can think of as far as what you kind of had to do intentionally along the way?
Yeah. Well, the external was looking for other people's validation. That was one of them. My
Wow.
second marriage was all about that
Okay.
because there were some points. So my first marriage ended. I felt worthless as a man, a husband, and a father. So I had to rebuild myself. I thought I built myself, but my second marriage, at some point in time, it was a toxic marriage. There was red flag. There was toxic marriage
Gotcha.
to start with, but at some point in time, there was validation from somebody that I was a good man, father, and husband. So I rode those coattails, and it obviously didn't work out because there was other things there was other issues.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized after that there's nobody who validates me but me. So externally, I was looking for things and people to tell me who I was, instead of me saying, "Hey, here is who Clay Smeltzer is." You know, even when I met my wife now, is I was still looking at that point in time for external things to tell me who I was and not me. So, you know, like we got out of, I got out of financial stress. We have a house, we have a car. We're financially pretty well. It's like, so I've gone from like living off of $972 a month. So external, I had chaos going on, which I thrive in that for some reason. When it got good, when things were great and we bought the house, we bought this, that's when I had that panic attack. That's when it got to the point where I was like, I have to change. Something has to be different with my life because everything was good around me. And I think a lot of times that's where especially men get things are good. But when we look internal, are they really good? And I was the guy who always walked around, said, people at school be like, how's it going? I'm like, oh, I'm good, man. It's good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. I said that. It's all good. But internally, I'm having anxiety. I'm having panic attacks. I'm thinking about like really super crazy stuff, like aliens attacking us and all that kind of other stuff. Like all these things that would throw me into these anxiety spirals. And I'm like, yeah, so I'm saying I'm good on the outside, or I'm telling everybody I'm good on the outside, but on the inside, I'm telling somebody different. So that's where that go back to that own yourself. I had to own that. For me to be exactly who I was meant to be, I had to own that. And if I didn't own that, I was just being fake.
That's good. Yeah. And I would even take it a step further, just like in my life, it's been, not to get off on this direction, but spirituality has played a role in that for me. And, I've done it on both sides of that fence. And I was kind of where you were and chasing all the status and fame and fortune and money and power and all this. And then when I realized, okay, it's kind of more than just about me. It's kind of bigger than me. And if I keep relying on just my own strength through all this, like I've proven that doesn't quite fill the gaps and the voids internally. And it doesn't always work for everybody. But, I had to kind of come to the realization that, God is good. He created us for a purpose. And it wasn't ever meant to just be all on my shoulders. So I kind of got a lot from that and started to feel some of those empty spaces in the compartments as men that we create, right? We compartmentalize. So in even some of those empty, voided spots, I started kind of feeling a little more fulfillment and contentment because I was sort of relying on, okay, God, you got this. I know that. And yes, I have a role in this, and own myself, right? But also understand the process of it's not just about me, and it's bigger than me. And I think God can empower us through that. And some of those folks out there that are watching that are like, I'm kind of on this hamster wheel of self-reliance, and my own strength is limited, and I really need to kind of find something a little bigger than that and something to rely on. And I encourage you, God wants to help you in that moment. He wants to hear from you, whether you go to church every Sunday and whether or not you read the Bible every day. That's kind of almost irrelevant. While those things are good, I think it's a point of getting alone in that space and kind of acknowledging, hey, I can't do it. It's not all about me. So as we kind of move on to the next one of barriers to progress and growth of the ABCs, we talk about approach, and you hit that tremendously. Some of the barriers that are out there, and you have talked a little bit about some of these: insecurity, pride, and fear. I mean, what guy doesn't, what guy hasn't sort of waved that banner, right? What guy hadn't sort of held up that poster at a football game? Insecurity, pride, and fear, because that's sort of what we have sort of let control us. Can you think of anything aside from, I know you talked about some of the anxiety, but talk about maybe some of the coaching or some of the leadership roles that you've had and how you've kind of had to battle some of those barriers to become the best version of that.
Yeah. Well, I think some of the other barriers we have too go along with the ones that you mentioned are shame, ego, and the anxieties in there, but shame and ego. I think really I was on with Vicky Helm on the morning coffee break with her, and a lot of times I said about shame and how I believe men run shame cycles more than women run shame cycles. And she's like, really? And it's something that, we always see pride with men, but we don't see shame with men. Well, because men don't talk about it. Because our pride or our ego doesn't allow us to talk about it. It doesn't allow it. It stops us from talking about it because, well, I'm less than, I'm a girl, I'm this, I'm that, and all those different things that come along with shame. But again, shame becomes our shadow. The more we don't talk about it, the more we feel shameful, the more our shadow grows, which again puts us in that shame cycle. But when we're talking about some of the coaching pieces of the leadership, I love John Maxwell. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
I'm not a reader, but I read John Maxwell. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's I love it, and he always says people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And when it comes down to leadership, you can know everything about men's leadership. You can know everything about whatever. I'm in education. I can know everything about curriculum, instruction, and assessment. But problem is if people don't think that I care about them as people, they don't care what I have to say. Just like my students don't care what I have to say unless they think I care about them as people, not as a test, not as this. Just like the guys I coach, the brotherhood I run, those guys don't care what I have to say unless they think that I care, or anybody else in the group. And that's something that I believe is powerful, because you have to, I believe in coaching is leading by example as well. John Maxwell says that as well. And it's like, for me, if I want the group to be open, to be honest, to be respectful, to be vulnerable, to be masculine at the same time, I got to do those qualities too. But I also have to be open to conversations that allow me to grow. I mean, I lead the brotherhood in the meetings. I start the Zoom meetings. We have the topics. I have the website. I have all that stuff. I run Purpose Infused Coaching, but we all run it when we're all on the screen. We all run it. It's our brotherhood. It's not my brotherhood. It's ours, because it's at points of times they've called me out and say, hey, what about this? What about this? And they've called me out to question me. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's a great question. I'm like, okay, let's go through that. So they've put me in the hot seat, just like we've helped other men in the hot seat as well. But that's one of the things I think about leadership is being open to being able to understand other people, and then let them know that you care. And that starts to take out those different things, like you said, pride, ego, shame, integrity, honesty, all those different things there. It starts to knock those out. So you're actually owning all of yourself and being the true you instead of that version you want other people to see.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you see in some of the leadership of the men that you're building and kind of locking arms with? What do you see as the most common? Is it the shame or is it something else? Like what's the most common battle?
Shame's usually that comes up. I'm pretty much every shame,
Okay.
ego, because it comes up, ego, pride. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
those manly things,
Yeah.
things we were taught. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
39 years old. I grew up in Pennsylvania. It's blue collar, work your butt off, and then things will happen for you. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I've done that my whole life, and things haven't happened that
Mm-hmm.
great. Sometimes
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
points not that great.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be something different to that. And I think what we got is as well is, especially in that 30 to 50-year-old range that have
Mm-hmm.
kids. Like I have 3 kids. Yeah. Our oldest daughter is 15. Our middle daughter is 13, and our son is 8.
Mm-hmm.
But I was taught to put everybody else first.
Right.
And in doing so, I put myself last. So when we talk about owning yourself, loving your story and living with purpose, I wasn't doing that. I was making sure everybody else was happy. But the problem is I can't make anybody else happy. I got to do this guy first, and if I'm not right, I can't help anybody else be right. If I don't love myself the most, I can't love the way I was supposed to. And when we
Mm-hmm.
take care of ourselves first,
Mm-hmm.
because we're said, no, don't do that, because that's selfish. You're selfish if you put yourself over your wife or your kids, but it's not, because I can't take care of them as best as I can if I don't take care of me first. So when we look at that, that's one of the biggest things that as we come through, I think it's that those cycles, those shame cycles of not being a provider, not being a protector in different ways. And we feel less than because we can't do this or we can't do that. And then that shame kicks in, that pride kicks in, that won't let us talk about our shame. And then it's just that vicious cycle that ping pongs back and forth
Right.
of pride and shame, and until we actually talk about it. And then once we talk about it, we share about it, we then can, what I always say is, we can step into our story, so then we can step up to lead.
Yeah. And I would say that pride is a symptom of shame.
Yes.
They all intertwine. And people watching this will say, well, the name of this is last in line leadership, and he's talking about himself first. And wait, is that counterintuitive? Let me explain. Put context around that, right? Because you're right on about, I think you would agree that to be a good leader in your coaching and education and to your home, it is important to obviously assess the needs of other people and to empower them, right? In your brotherhood, you empower those guys so that they can rise up and empower somebody else. What you're saying, though, is just what they say when you're on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Like when that oxygen mask comes down, what do they tell you? Put it on you, right? You're no good to anybody else if you can't breathe. So that's what you're saying, and I hope people understand that. We're not here to muddy the waters, but Clay is saying the absolute correct thing, and he's also agreeing that in leadership we do prop others up. But we have to, like you said, we got to sort of peel the onion of ourselves so that we can know what we're good at first, right? And so that we can walk in the best version of that to help other people. And I think others, I hope they get that on this. And I will tell you something else like that came to me, and I want you to talk about this for a minute. Drive versus dread. So when we talk about what limits ourselves, and this whole point of this is get out of your way.
Yeah.
What I've found, and dread is attached to fear, of course, and we've kind of hit on that, but drive versus dread came to me. So what's that internal drive, that internal engine that kind of puts you over that hump of the dread factor? Because I get up every day and there's certain tasks that I'm just dreading that I have to do, right? And I don't want to do them. And I don't really know. Maybe it's because I don't feel like I'm good at that, or maybe I'm fearful of what obstacles I'm going to encounter in that, or what people are going to get in the, whatever. Talk about drive versus dread. That's a little off script, so you haven't had time to prepare for that, but I think you probably have a good answer.
I'm good. I love when we're off script.
Exactly.
Just slide, let it go. I love it.
That's right.
So drive and dread to me goes into the motivation versus inspiration.
Okay.
That's kind of what I think about. A lot of people say going to the gym. Well, I'm not motivated to go. Well, you're not going to be motivated till you get there.
Sure.
The inspiration is what's going to allow you to take action. So when you go back to drive and dread, your drive is an inspiration that's going to get you to take action. The dread is, again, what you said, fear. It's going to be fear about something or the monotony of it. Because listen, as humans, we hate monotony. We hate boring. You know, when we're talking about business, I'm very bad at the organizational stuff. I'm very good at the action stuff. Just let's go do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I dread that organizational stuff, but I got to get better at this, and I will own that I got to get super better at this. But I would dive in there to get some of those things done, but I'll take some time. I'm dreading it, so I need to find more inspiration behind those matters in order to do that. But for me, I think it's a motivation, inspiration. Find that inspiration, find that why. What are you doing it for? Why are you doing it? And don't just sit on the surface level. You know, I'll take the gym again, and foundation. I have 4 foundations: your body, your mind, your bonds, and your bills. So foundation 1 is your body. So let's look at that. When you're looking at surface level, why? Okay, I want to go to the gym. Why? Well, because I want to look good. That's surface level. Go another level deeper. Why do you want to look good? Well, because right now I have this like little part of my belly that I don't really like. Okay, why don't you like that? So when we go, I always do the 5 whys, and we go down to about level 3, 4, or 5. Then you're really finding out exactly why you want to get rid of this. And it isn't because you want to look good. It's much deeper than that. So when you look at that and you go deep, which guys aren't we have a tendency to look surface level. Hey, I want to look good, so my wife thinks I look good, you know, but it's more than that. It's not about your wife. It's actually about you.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so when we dive into that, it gives us inspiration in order to action. And that's your drive instead of the dread. And that allows you to go over the hump. It's always coming back to what I call, as an athlete, coming back to center. So what position did you play?
Yeah. I was an infielder, second base.
Yeah. So yeah, I love second base.
Yeah.
So you got to stay center. So when you get into your crouch and you're ready to pull up, you got to stay center. So when you're center, I can pivot this way. I can pivot this way. Something goes in the hole, I can get there, and so forth. And when you look at that, my center is my purpose. My purpose is to own myself, love my story, and live with purpose, and help other people do that. So I got to stay center so I can pivot. So if I'm leaning over here and I'm off center, I got to find myself back. So when the things come that are dreadful and I'm like, oh, I really don't want to do this, it always comes back to center. And I'm like, what am I doing this for? If it helps me own myself, love my story, and live with purpose, I do it. If it doesn't, I don't. And that's actually my qualifier. So just like this
filter, that's your filter.
That's my filter. So just like our this conversation here with us, is it going to help me own myself, love my story, live with purpose, and help other people do that? Absolutely. So we're having it. If it didn't, I won't have it.
Yeah. That's perfect. You know, people need to have that kind of internal compass and that sort of that checkpoint of, yes, it does qualify because it hits these points. I think that's good, but this problem people have is even knowing what those points are. Correct. That they want to hit. And back to that drive, I mean, I love what you said about inspiration, motivation, and you drew the line of distinction there so clearly. I hadn't thought about that. And then it got me thinking, well, our drive is more attached to our strengths and our dread is more toward our weaknesses, right? Yep. What we're not good at, we dread. What we're good at, we're first in line to do, right? And so I agree with you. It's a good analogy with the gym. But so we disqualify ourselves all the time, and that's kind of the point of this. And I think some of this series of Get Out of Your Way is probably more pointed at me and me starting to assess some of the things that I need to work on.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's funny because we limit ourselves, and Chip Baker says this, the Success Chronicle guy, as everybody knows him. He says, Chip. Hey, and so he says, you only limit yourself when you limit yourself. And that really is so simple, but so true. So we've talked about approach and we've talked about barriers, and we probably could talk another 2 hours on barriers because men have that. And men, like you were talking about, guys want to know that you care, that trust level is key. And people, what I've found, even guys, the ones that aren't even the touchy feely kind of guys, which we really can be if we let ourselves be, but trust depends a lot on vulnerability and transparency. Yep. And it sounds like you've hit that huge with your brotherhood and your teams that you coach. Like, they have to know you're transparent. They have to know you're vulnerable before they will trust you.
Correct.
And so that's perfect. So to lead into kind of how we close this out with clutter.
Mm-hmm.
So the C, clearing the debris really around us, and kind of use the analogy of, the road construction and kind of detours and barriers, and how do we get down this road even though there's clutter along the way? How do we clear that debris? So there's things that we hear, there's things that externally, there's things that we talk about to ourselves and tell ourselves. So what things were you telling yourself that sort of held you back, that you had to kind of realize, okay, that's not the truth about Clay Smeltzer?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the examples? Give me some examples, even if it's something you may be going through now currently. I know you've gotten over some big humps and some big roadblocks before. Talk about lies versus truth.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good one. Because what you said about the road and going and taking, the road's not always straight.
Mm-hmm.
We say the fastest point from point A to B is a straight line, but the problem in life is it's never a straight line. It never happens. So we come to the road and there's a fork in the road and we're like, what do we do now?
We weren't expecting that. Yeah.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, that's not what we were expecting. And expectation is one of these things that, for me, was one of those lies I kept telling myself, because especially as men, we have this, and me, and I believe this is more in athlete. This happens more in athletes, especially, is that we have this high expectation of ourselves, but the expectation that we have versus our reality is extremely different. So
Sure.
Our expectation level is way up here. So, hey, I'm going to step up to the plate. My expected is to hit a home run or to score all the people in there. So My expectation is right up here, but my reality is I struck out or got a base hit. And it's like, oh, okay. Well, then it goes into, well, what's everybody else want to see? Everybody wants to hit a bomb. Everybody else wants to do this. Everybody else wants to do this. But when we get down to the basics of the game, what wins games? Base hits.
Yeah.
Getting on base.
Base runners. Yeah.
Base runners. You got to be on base to win. I've only seen one time in my life where a home run won a game.
Sure.
And that was never when I played. And I've played in literally thousands and thousands of games.
Sure.
But I've only seen one when I was coaching, which was like 2 years ago, where a home run won a game.
Yeah.
That was it. And
we skew what good looks like, don't we? Yeah. We skew what good looks like. We put it. We elevate this, like you're saying. We elevate that to a point of unattainability almost.
Correct. Yeah, and that's where it is. Our expectation isn't where we're at. Yeah. So that's one of the biggest lies I always told myself, is my expectation for this, and I still do that to this day. Is put my expectation of, hey, it's supposed to be up here, and then it's down here. Well, then when we look at it, another hindrance for me and a lie that I said to myself was anxiety. That's what I lied to myself a lot about, that is because that expectation versus reality is what created my anxiety, because I'm expecting this, or I got, when I was 20, I got sick for like a year. I had like 8 appendicitis in a year, and they wouldn't take it out because, well, I didn't have all the symptoms. I'm like, dude, something. So it finally got taken out. But what that did is that really put me mentally in a spot. Some of the things happened. I got sick when I traveled the one time really bad. And what it did is it created this anxiety inside of me. And just a couple of weeks ago, I actually faced a lot of that I haven't faced in 20 different years in the situation. And that actually really held me back. And it was a lie I was telling myself, because I was lying to myself that basically I was trying to get out of something that my wife really wanted me to go to and participate in. But I was trying to use that as a way to get out of stuff. And I have, and I was lying to myself that I was doing that. But that held me back from different experiences that we've had, because, well, this fear, this shame, this being scared held me mentally in a certain spot, which didn't make me move, didn't make me take action. And it was that realization that doing it and going through those things, and that was 15 years ago. Like, that was something that was holding me back 15 years. It's crazy. So it's the more that you lighten the shadow, the more we understand that the shadow has different layers. So I know there's going to be more coming up. And the thing is here's what I believe. I believe you will continue to get the lesson until you learn the lesson, which has happened to me a lot. I've kept getting the same lesson, but I didn't learn it. and you'll continue to do that. But now, because I know who I am, I own myself, love my story, and live with purpose. My eyes are now open. My ears are now open. My mind is now open to seeing the lesson and then learning from it. So I don't continue to go through the same thing.
No.
So
Yeah.
that way, those layers of the shadow will probably, there'll still be more. But again, the lies that we tell ourselves, look just like, oh, I'm good. It's all everything. It's all good. It's all good. When a guy says that to me, I know he's probably full of
Yeah.
crap.
Way to go right there. Because I don't have an editing button. Good job. You did well. I saw where you're going. Hey, talking about what you said earlier about expectations, man, that was huge. Because what I think we should pause here for the audience and say is, it's not wrong to have lofty goals, right? It's not wrong to dream big, but it's understanding your capabilities within that and within the framework of whatever particular season you're in. Not that that's going to be the same in a year. You're obviously going to grow, but where you are right now, set reasonable expectations based on those capabilities. And because if you don't, like you said, you're setting yourself up for failure on a regular basis. And then it's the spiral of fear, insecurity. I can't ever be good enough. That's preaching to the choir, because for so many years, like you, we've lived that way. And what we're trying to do for people now, hopefully a generation to follow, is to not make them have to go through that journey of self, doubt and limitations and insecurity. So to get out of our way, which is the whole point of this series, is almost self-identify realistically, and then don't hinder yourself in that. Be real. And I will say that you segue this perfectly, because you talk about the shadow and you talk about the layers of that shadow and the multi-level, corporation that is, that's the shadow of our shame and insecurity. Like I've always said, if we bury it, we carry it. And so if we keep shoving that down and never get somebody to sort of, for lack of a better term, dump that on or share with or ask for help, we carry it. Like you said, for 15 years, you buried it because it was all good. Yeah. So you had to carry it, right? So you had to carry it. And that weight prevented some of the growth. So you have a brotherhood. So this segues perfectly into accountability, segues perfectly into rallying around a group of like-minded people, men's ministry, which we both have a heart and a passion for. Talk to me about that accountability and some of the ways that you rely on that to stay kind of back to center, to stay level. Talk about some of that, and then kind of tell me about some of the platform and how that's helped those men.
Absolutely. And I think it's one thing, going back to expectation, is we need to really understand what our gifts are. John Maxwell talks about this really well. Is you got to operate in your gift and your greatness.
Absolutely.
Like swimming is not my greatness. I could be, dude, as an athlete, Michael Phelps, I would love to be that dude, but I'm never going to be him. I am a 2 when it comes to swimming. In high school, the warm up was swim down and back in the pool and then get out. I swam down, everybody was already back, so I got out at the other end. I'm like, put me on a field, put me on a court, dude. I'm all day. Put me in water, ain't gonna happen. And it's like, so, but we got to be realistic about what we can actually do.
Sure.
And make sure that we're staying in our gifts, because we see these grandiose things, and I get it from students all the time. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a YouTuber. I'm like, dude, you guys really won. You don't understand how hard it is to do that, how much they work, because they work way more than your work, ever will work here at school. And it's like, but what is your gift? If that's not in your gift, that's not going to work for you. You're not going to be good at that. If it is in your gift, I say go after it. But when we look at that and we go back into what are the things that help us stay accountable, it's other people. One, we got to stay accountable to ourselves.
Sure.
And how to do that, the mirror is the great equalizer. I asked this week on the podcast and stuff, and in the work that we did for each week or for the week, is to go ask yourself one of the hard questions that you need to ask yourself, but do it in a mirror. We can all do it out here everywhere. But when I'm looking in the mirror here, that's hard. I also challenge people to go look in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you, and mean it and believe
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because when you do that, that means you actually are taking ownership of yourself. Because this dude right here that I'm staring at right here, that guy right here in the video or in the mirror, that's the only person who knows exactly who I am and knows every choice that I've made. And when we look at that, self-accountability is number one, I think. Two, it's having people that you can go to, whether that's your wife, whether that's your spouse, whether it's a relationship, your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, whatever it may be. Or for me, it's also a brotherhood of men,
Mm-hmm.
because I can talk to my wife. She gets it, but she doesn't get some things
Right.
because she doesn't think like I do, but getting into that brotherhood of men, there's accountability. Just like I told you, they called me out. I'm okay with that. I've been called
Right.
out like 2 or 3 times. We've called other people out, but we're vulnerable, and vulnerability allows us to be able to step into our story, step into that emotion, that feeling, that hurt, that scar, that pain, that reward as well. Because lots of times as men, we don't reward ourselves the way we're supposed to. I'm one of them. And don't reward myself. I just go to the next thing.
Yeah.
But it allows us to step into that so we can step up to lead ourselves. And when we get ourselves right, we know exactly who we are. When John knows exactly who you are.
Yeah.
John is this. This is who John is. You can exponentially expand yourself to other people. When we put everybody else first, we can only give portions of ourselves. And that's where it's like the accountability factor comes back to when I log on every Tuesday night to those guys, I got to be accountable for the actions I've made from the week to this week.
Right.
Whether it's action steps we've had in that group, or it's conversations that we've had or have had. I've said this. I need to make sure I'm doing this to stay accountable to myself, but also to stay accountable to my brothers. It's like, as an athlete, you're an athlete too. It's like we sweat, we bled, we sweat, we won, we lost, we did everything together. So I always say in our brotherhood, we stand shoulder to shoulder, shield to shield, because that's what we do. And we're all around the country. We're in Canada as well, and it's like we built this network of men that hold each other accountable to the things that we said who we are.
Sure.
And I think that's the most powerful thing. But we're also willing to share without shaming, without judging, there's some really, really hard stuff that people have talked about. But I've learned a ton from that because I was open to being understanding that man. And I don't think that's what we have a lot. We have this right, I'm right, you're wrong mentality.
Yeah.
I think we can kick that out of the way, and it's just not productive. And get back to, hey, John, I understand you. You understand me. We may not agree on everything.
Right.
We have an understanding to make both of us better.
Yeah. Because let's be honest, we're all broken in some way, or have been, or will be, and so, to understand that that's just part of life, and there really is no condemnation in that. I think that's commendable, that those guys hold you accountable too. I think even if you're kind of the leader, like I teach a class on Wednesday nights, and it's a men's, and we agree on that class too. This doesn't happen without each other. Like iron sharpens iron. We don't get there without another guy. And it was, that was created 2,000 years ago, when 12 guys followed a leader. And so I would say we just got to be vulnerable. We got to be transparent. We got to be real. We got to have grace and patience with each other, because we can't walk this out alone. So I appreciate, what you've talked about today. I think it's been huge for the audience. It's important to see, because neither one of us are, celebrities, preachers, these professional motivation. We're not John Maxwell. We're guys who have had experiences that we've learned from, that we want to take the good and the bad and pass it on. And so I think that really makes this relatable. And I think the people watching this got something out of it. I think that they have to realize what they're good at. In the book that I just released, talk about gifts. Like you said, realize what you're good at. Tell people where they can find you, and maybe give us one last nugget if you have one, just to encourage the listeners.
Cool, will do. For me, you can find me on Facebook, Clay Smeltzer, Instagram, Clay Smeltzer, LinkedIn as well. You can find me at Purpose Infused Coaching. Just look that up. I think it's /Kajabi. So you can find me there. You can find me any of your podcast platforms, and it's the Purpose Infused Men's Podcast. Also, a private Facebook group as well, Purpose Infused Men. So you can find me a whole bunch of places. You can just type my name in. You can see my podcast. I've been on a bunch of different other podcasts as well. So just listen. I just want to be the same person here that I am out there. If you meet me in person, I'm the same person everywhere, because I've been fake too long of my life to not be now real. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to leave everybody with is, in this life, we got one shot at this thing. Mm-hmm. We got one life. And to make sure that my dad always taught me, he lined everybody up on the field. He was one of my high school coaches as well. And he lined everybody up on the field at the foul line, at the line. And he said, hey, before you step, make sure you're ready to step across this line. Because when you step across this line, you need to give everything you got. Mm-hmm. And for me, I take that into every day. Is I used to wake up, roll out of bed and be miserable and angry because I had to wake up then. But now, before I put my feet on the ground, that's my line across. Yeah. My feet hit the floor. And before I do that, I tell myself, I'm going to give it everything I got. So when I lay my head down on the pillow at night, I know I left it all in the field. So I just want everybody to own themselves. I want them to love their story. I want them to live with purpose. I want them to wake up every single day with excitement. At the end of the day, leave it all in the field, because we never know if it might be our last day.
That's right. So, hey, I hope you guys wrote some stuff down. If not, get a pen and paper, get in a room, think about the approach, the barriers, the clearing the debris that we talked about. Get in the mirror, like Clay said, and get real with yourself. And that way you can start to get real with others. So I say get out of your way and see what God does in your life. So until next time, be blessed.